Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll be starting soonish. So grab some water. Okay, I think we can get started-ish. I see all of our speakers are in the room. And thanks everyone for joining, and thanks for also the last minute arrangements on the agenda. As we highlighted on the list, this is a series of webinars that's being organized by the MAG Working Group Strategy. I am one of the co-facilitators, but I'm also joined on this call by Amrita, Chris, Titi, and Arietta, the other co-facilitators. And the general purpose of the webinars was to discuss some of the inputs to the WSIS+20 Review Elements paper and some of the statements that have been made around across events and also as a contribution to the Elements paper in general. For today, we have three speakers, three and maybe four. I think Alvaro is joining us in the end of the call as well. But we will be speaking about three different submissions as we highlighted on the chat, but also for the ones that joined now, we will be joined by Craig Stanley Adamson, Head of Internet Governance at the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, UK Government. Israel Rosas is also joining us. He's part of Internet Society as Director of Partnerships and Internet Development. And Ellie McDonald, Policy and Advocacy Lead at Global Partners Digital, is also joining us. Each of them will speak to a different contribution or statement made around the WSIS+20 review and the Elements paper. I will just correct one of the links. Oh no, Mariette already corrected all of the links in the chat, but you guys can take a look at each and every one of them as we posted them for you. And we'll just to flag that Henriette is also my co-facilitator in this webinar. Henriette, I don't know if you want to say hello or if you want to add anything to the conversation, but you're more than welcome.
Thanks very much, Bruna, and everyone. Pardon my voice is not great. I'm recovering from flu. Just to say that the primary purpose of these webinars are to firstly recognize that there are people that are really putting effort into thinking about the WSIS and about IGF and about the future of the IGF. And we felt that they deserved more public hearings and an opportunity for all of us to hear their ideas and reflect on that. So just a warm welcome to everyone, and thanks for being part of this. We're going to have a further 3. And please, if anybody wants to join and feel that they've written something they feel we should discuss at one of these webinars, just let us know. Back to you, Bruna.
Thanks so much. And also thanks everyone for joining on time. I feel like this is one of the most accurate webinars we've hosted at the Working Group Strategy. So maybe I'll start with you, Israel. Would you like to run us through a little bit of what was ISOC's submission and position with regards to the broader review and elements paper? You
Yeah,
have
no,
the
awesome. Thank you very much. I have a couple of slides. I don't know if that would be useful. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to share it, but I will make it quickly just to respect the agenda for today. So basically, and thank you for sharing the link, and thank you for the invitation. A pivotal moment for
your slide.
digital cooperation. Perfect. For digital cooperation in general, because we've seen that over 2 decades, the internet has changed, but also how people have used it. So at this point, global multi-stakeholder cooperation is essential. What we have in this non-paper is that the fact that we need to protect the internet's fundamental characteristics to strengthen the attributes of successful multi-stakeholder governance, and use those 2 pieces as a focus for the WSIS+20 review to enable core abilities for people when using the internet. But the something that I find interesting from our non-paper is that we are focusing at this point in the WSIS+20 review, but we are seeing these core abilities as something needed no matter the process that we are following. It could be the implementation of the Global Digital Compact, the World Development Telecommunications Conference, the Plenipotentiary Conference next year. Any other development in the internet ecosystem should be building on these fundamental characteristics of the internet and the attributes of the successful multi-stakeholder governance. So particularly the fundamental characteristics for the internet is what we have called in previous years the internet way of networking. This ability of the internet of having global reach, a group of decentralized networks based on confidentiality and integrity, based on open and collaborative governance. It's a general purpose technology with open and voluntary standards, which is related to, for instance, the work of the IGF and other standardization organizations, and particularly innovation without prior permission. So if we take that in a combination with what we see as the attributes of multi-stakeholder governance, we can have this enabling environment that could be useful in the context of the WSIS+20 review. Something that we are insisting a lot and that it's derived of the conversation with our chapter organization members, partners within the ecosystem, is that for us, multi-stakeholder governance is this way in which the internet is developed, operated, managed, governed openly and in collaboration by multiple stakeholders for the benefit of the public. So that's something that we want to position explicitly, because we've seen different interpretations of what's multi-stakeholder, if a way of collaboration could be perceived as multi-stakeholder. So we decided to list all these attributes for this enabling environment for global cooperation. For us, it's key that if many stakeholders can participate in the decision-making, it's important to have them from many countries, from many cultures, so we can have a stronger result based on openness, on inclusiveness, transparency, collaboration and shared responsibility, and effective decision-making and implementation. So in general, as if we take these 2 group of attributes and characteristics, then we can focus on the priorities that we have for the WSIS+20 review. Based on this couple of groups, we are pushing for the WSIS+20 review to reaffirm the foundational principles of the WSIS plan of action. We believe that it's still fit for purpose because it was designed to be flexible, technology neutral. So first of all, we are proposing to focus the review and its outcomes on the foundational principles of ensuring that the internet continues to offer the core abilities for everyone that I'm going to just quickly show. Protect and nurture the fundamental characteristics of the internet, the technical characteristics of the internet. Affirm the Net Mundial +10 commitment that the internet is a global resource. And also based on the mechanisms for cooperation, just recommit to multi-stakeholder governance. We have a consensus that is working. So we need that the WSIS+20 review should recommit to that commitment, adhere to the Net Mundial principles for internet governance, renew the IGF's mandate with sustainable funding, and also strengthen the network of regional and local initiatives of internet governance. And basically, continue to implement the WSIS action lines. Ensure that the Global Digital Compact is implemented within the framework of WSIS, and commit to use the internet to help achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Something that I'm going to stop sharing just to keep mindful of time. Something that we are also really focusing the non-paper is that the outcomes of the WSIS+20 review are going to be, of course, fundamental, but the work is not done yet. Connectivity is a good piece. We've done a lot of progress, the multi-stakeholder community, but we still need to keep pushing to connecting the people that has not access, but also to keep fostering the conditions for the internet to be open, trustworthy, safe for people. So there's a lot of work to be done. We have a really good framework. It's important to keep going, not just because of the inertia, but because there's a forward-looking vision, and the WSIS+20 review is a unique opportunity to cement the right pieces to keep going, to keep progressing. So thank you for the opportunity to be here, and happy to keep the conversation going in the next session, the next sections. Thank you.
Thanks, Zyle. We're probably going to bring you back soonish, so hold in there. I'm going to go to Ellie now. Ellie, you're presenting on the Elements paper response on the Global Digital Rights Coalition, right? So you have the floor, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bruna, and thank you indeed to everybody in the working group strategy. I think this is a really excellent initiative, and really looking forward to taking part in the rest of the sessions too. So as you mentioned, I'll speak today briefly about the written input of the Global Digital Rights Coalition for WSIS. This input was developed by 18 organisations from the global north and south with decades of collective experience in human rights-based digital policy. So I'd like to talk in greater detail about two elements of our submission. First, human rights and ethical dimensions, and second, recognising and advancing the multi-stakeholder approach. So first, with respect to human rights, we're of the view that the WSIS vision of building a people-centred, inclusive and development-oriented information society premised on human rights continues to resonate and draw communities around it. But there are serious challenges to realising this vision. They include, for instance, the scaling of data-driven technologies, expanding means of surveillance, market concentration, and persistent digital divides. These challenges require approaches which are strongly anchored in human rights and multi-stakeholder engagement, and which maintain the global, open, and free internet. I'd like to highlight 6 of the recommendations we make related to the text of the outcome document, and then 1 related to the WSIS framework. So we emphasise that the final outcome document should first underscore the universality, interdependence, and indivisibility of all human rights. This is reflected already in the Geneva Declaration and Tunis Agenda. Second, reaffirm that the same rights that apply offline must also be protected online. This is also reflected in the WSIS+10 outcome document and in numerous UNGA and Human Rights Council resolutions. Third, anchor the language in international human rights law and standards. Here we recommend referring to the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Together, these comprise the International Bill of Rights, By mentioning them alongside other international human rights treaties, we can ensure the broadest possible scope of protection. Fourth, reassert the roles and responsibilities of the private sector to conduct human rights due diligence and impact assessment, provide access to a remedy and avert abuses, including by referencing the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. Fifth, ensure a gender-responsive approach, incorporating gender as a cross-cutting element throughout the implementation of the action lines and reaffirming the GDC's commitment to gender mainstreaming. And sixth, recognize the structural barriers and persistent digital divides that disproportionately impact specific categories of rights holders and promote concrete measures to achieve meaningful connectivity. Then, to support all of these textual recommendations, we recommend strengthening the WSIS architecture to better mainstream a human rights approach by assigning the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights a formal role as a co-facilitator of Action Line 10 on human rights and ethics. Action Line 10 is dedicated to upholding universally held values and preventing abusive use of ICTs. The OHCHR has produced reams of authoritative guidance on internet and digital policy making that are derived from universal and binding human rights law obligations. So we think it's crucial that the office takes up the role of mainstreaming this through WSIS implementation efforts to ensure that the WSIS's ethical goals can be met. We note that this is also included in the OHCHR's own submission. I'd like to come now to the second part, which I'd like to discuss, which is the multi-stakeholder approach. So in our view, the WSIS process should both accurately reflect the existing multi-stakeholder approach to global internet governance, but also strive to strengthen and improve the application of multi-stakeholder principles in both multilateral and multi-stakeholder processes. So for this, we recommend that the Zero Draft does four things. First, that it acknowledges the roles and contributions of all stakeholders as reflected more accurately in the WSIS+10 outcome document. That it second recognizes that cooperation between stakeholders in both multi-stakeholder and multilateral processes should be premised on the Sao Paulo multi-stakeholder guidelines agreed at Net Mundial +10. We think these provide a really sound basis. Third, make the IGF permanent, acknowledging the need to secure additional funding to strengthen its capacity and ensure greater participation from underrepresented communities. And fourth, reaffirm that the GDC objectives and initiatives will be integrated through the WSIS process, reflecting the language agreed in the recently adopted ECOSOC and previously the CSTD resolution on WSIS+20 follow-up. In addition, we recommend ensuring that this joint implementation is strengthened by multi-stakeholder processes and procedures. And with this in mind, we really appreciate the proposal by Switzerland for UNGIS to develop a joint implementation roadmap and for there to be a multi-stakeholder steering group, which would be established to complement UNGIS in overseeing the implementation of the GDC and WSIS commitments. To conclude, a quick note on the things that I wasn't able to talk about more fully, but are included in the submission. We also provide recommendations for promoting media freedom and public interest journalism, ensuring human rights-based platform governance to counter profit-driven and data extractive business models, guaranteeing data protection, addressing negative environmental impacts throughout the technological lifecycle, and other matters. And some of the members of the GDRC have also elaborated in their own organisational positions on those matters. So I would also encourage you to look at those as well as our input. Thank you. I will pause there and I know we'll come back for some discussion later.
Thanks so much, Ali. And moving on to Craig as well. Craig, are you ready to present on the UK position for that?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Bruna. Thank you, Henriette, for putting this together and for inviting me to speak to you all and present UK's position. As I say, this is going to be UK's sort of response to the Elements paper consultation. Unfortunately, we're not quite as gossy or shiny as some of our other colleagues around the room, particularly from other governments who have put together some fantastic non-papers with much more detail than what you're going to hear from me just now. However, a lot of this does reflect a lot of the positive messaging that the UK has been putting forward over the past few months, even before the Elements paper. And this was a really good opportunity to put this into some form of more concrete writing and put it into the process. A lot of what I'm actually going to say will complement and echo some of what the previous speakers have said as well, which is obviously fantastic that so many of us are looking at this from a similar angle and on the same page. But then in summary, just some headline points from our views on the Elements paper. We think that a lot of the headings were positive. A good overview of the issues that we are facing since 2015 and that are present today. It recognises a lot of the progress made and the urgent need to connect particularly a third of the population that's still offline. There's a little bit further we can go in some of the last mile approaches and proposals, particularly around community networks and things like that, which we would like to see in a little bit more detail in the draft zero. However, there are a few concerns, pretty big concerns from ourselves at this early stage, that the paper in some way was a little bit backwards looking. I hope this isn't going to be reflected then in the zero draft, particularly around internet governance, some of the human rights stuff that Ellie's just mentioned as well. And that doesn't take into account a lot of the really great work, really great language that was agreed at the GDC just last year, less than a year ago, particularly around internet governance, data, and AI. And again, similar to sort of a little bit what Ellie's just said there, the paper really didn't fully reflect the need for a truly inclusive multi-stakeholder approach, which has been essential to the WSIS process since 2003 to 2005. So that's sort of the headline comments that we have. But now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail, particularly sort of section by section. And as I say, we really do welcome the emphasis on some of the key topic areas around sustainable development, environmental impacts, bridging digital divides, enabling environment, as well as human rights and capacity building. We obviously within human rights there is talk about sort of gender, women and girls, and it's sort of dotted around a lot of the paper, but we are calling first and foremost for a dedicated section on the gender digital divide, particularly the need to support women and girls and you know, around skills and access and things like that. We do feel that this issue requires a lot more joined up focus. As I say, shouldn't be dotted around various sections. And as Ellie said as well, I think there's a need for really sort of strengthening the WSIS architecture with some of the other key UN agencies and bodies that are crucial to a lot of this work. And I'll sort of come on to that in a little bit more detail as we go. So just in a little bit more detail then on environmental impacts, as I say, we strongly welcome this. This really sort of reflects a lot of the priorities that have come to the fore in the last few years, particularly since SDGs in 2015. We feel this could be expanded a little bit more, particularly to include say the positive benefits of ICTs to the environment, so not everything's negative. So for example, the fact, you know, online meetings leading to reduced travel and stuff like that, but then also increasing problems around e-waste, which hasn't been referred to either, and some sort of innovative ways in which we can look to sort of tackle that. Again, enabling environment, a lot of this is quite positive, but again, there's ways in which we think we can expand to include some more critical elements, such as competition, affordability, I think independent and predictable regulation, and proportionate taxation is something that's quite important within there as well. As I say, I agree with a lot of what Ellie's just said on sort of human rights and ethical dimensions. You know, there's a lot that the text does not fully set out in terms of internationally recognised human rights, and particularly around language. We feel there's more that this section can do as well around sort of online censorship, internet shutdowns as well, given that we had a reference in the GDC, independent media, the need to protect journalists, media workers, and sort of other human rights defenders. And as part of this as well, we really do think there's a need for a formalised role of the UN OHCHR within this and within the rest of the WSIS architecture. On building confidence and security in the use of ICTs, this should say a little bit more about promoting cyber resilience, I would say, as that sort of capacity building sense as part of the WSIS development agenda. The likes of cybercrime, state behavior in cyberspace are addressed elsewhere in the UN system through processes which are separate to WSIS, and this WSIS review, in our view, should not duplicate them at all in this process. Internet governance, as I mentioned, we sort of see this as a little bit going a little bit backwards from what has been agreed more recently. We're surprised that this doesn't reflect, say, some of those agreements in the GDC, which recognised, and to quote, internet governance must continue to be global and multi-stakeholder in nature. We're also quite sort of sorry to see the discussion reopened, the age-old debate around enhanced cooperation. And we feel that the paper really doesn't recognise the work that 2 CSCD working groups took on this issue, or that the IANA transition has now been addressed, and essentially that's the motivation that some had for this specific usage for this specific term 20 years ago. In our view, we have really good examples of essentially enhanced cooperation in recent years, notwithstanding recent GDC and some of the initiatives that have come out of that as well. And we really sort of see that this WSIS review should not be getting bogged down in some of those discussions where we can never really come to any sort of agreement, but there are examples of it elsewhere. And we really should be looking at how this should be a really future-focused agenda, positive impact, positive outcomes, and really sort of making sure this is something that is going to be future-driven in that sense. The paper as well, we really didn't recognise the many calls that we've had for an extended or permanent mandates for the IGF. Just from our personal view, we've not heard anyone say that there should not be an IGF, and we are hearing even increasing voices that it should be a permanency. So the fact that this was not reflected in the paper was slightly disappointing, but I'm sure something that could be remedied well in due course. But also alongside that, a more formal recognition for the role of local and regional IGFs, which play such an important role in promoting inclusion, bringing up the next leaders in sort of internet governance and digital and tech, as well as community and local solutions to a lot of these opportunities and challenges. And also fairly surprising that the WSIS Forum was not mentioned in there as well. But again, I'm sure that's something that we remedied fairly well. I'm going to come on to data governance and artificial intelligence now. This is another areas of a couple of concerns for the UK. Data governance particularly, we do not believe that there should be a section on data governance here. This was already dealt with in the GDC, again, just less than a year ago, and we should allow the CSCD working group to complete its work, not undermine it or not preempt it. Obviously noting that it's a very important discussion, but again, we should not be looking to duplicate or create further initiatives when there's something that was already hard achieved ongoing elsewhere. Similarly, on artificial intelligence, the section's a little bit unbalanced and should reflect more accurately what was recently agreed in the GDC. I think one example being the GDC said governance of AI should be multi-stakeholder, but that is not reflected here either. The GDC says the UN has an important role to play. It is not clear why the elements paper says it is essential. The zero draft as well does need to sort of make sure that no new proposals are, again, similar to data governance, that we don't have any new initiatives whilst all those AI GDC initiatives are ongoing in the sidelines. The sort of next point is on monitoring and measurement. We agree that this is important and support the development of roadmaps for each of the WSIS action lines, particularly crucial when linking up some of the SDGs and the 2030 agenda coming up in a few years, the GDC initiatives, and everything else that's being developed by UN agencies. And then just as part of this, in terms of the future process and sort of looking to how to encapsulate UN initiatives more broadly, the UK, again, is supportive of integrating the initiatives of the GDC into the WSIS process, as Ellie just mentioned, which was recently approved by ECOSOC, the CSCD resolution that many of us were a part of back in April. So we fully support that and hope we'll be able to continue that through WSIS and look to see how we can actually achieve that going forwards. But I'll stop there. That's the sort of headline run through. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks so much for adding to the conversation as well. And I'm going to bring Avri now as our last speaker, and Avri is going to talk about her own submission that I just posted on the chat as well, and it's named 4 Responses on the Future of Internet Governance. Avri, you have the floor.
Thank you, Bruna. Thanks for including me at this last minute, and thanks for including me as just an individual comment among all these major pieces of work. My comments were really an extension on the remarks that I made there. And so again, I appreciate being included in this group. I really wanted to make 4 practical points when I was there. I realized looking at all the comments that people would be sending, that most of the theoretical work, most of the policy stuff was recommended, but I was really quite concerned about a couple of things. One, as was mentioned just now by Craig of UK, is enhanced cooperation. The fact that it continues to disrupt and confuse the conversations. And so probably I added a little bit to the confusion. But what I was trying to argue is, on one hand, there are those that say this is a single stakeholder issue that doesn't need the cooperation of multi-stakeholders. It's a multilateral issue, in which case, fine, go take care of it in your silo, go take care of it, in your multilateral, thing. Otherwise, though, as a multi-stakeholder issue, it is something that not only have we been arguing about over 20 years, and I've been part of the argument for 20 years, it's something that is being done. There's both an informal aspect and a formal aspect of it. I don't know that many of you remember 20 years ago, we didn't all talk to each other. We didn't all have dinners and go to parties with each other. We were separate silos. There was really almost no contact except for some ECOSOC members, but even then, not really, with the multilateral system. So informally, the enhanced cooperation has happened. We are all cooperating. We get as far as we get because we have an informal enhanced cooperation. Now, on the formal enhanced cooperation, I sort of, I think, come from the same place that Craig came from, in that we see examples of it. We see examples of the multilateral and the multi-stakeholder becoming connected, becoming interwoven at times. We see it, one example from the Freedom Online Coalition and its advisory network at one end of the spectrum of things that people can do to have sort of an enhanced cooperation between a multilateral. Multilateral's not going to go away. Multi-stakeholders not going to go away. What we're arguing is sort of how we extend into the future. So assuming that neither one of those is going away, how do they interact? And we see it at a far end of another example. We see the ICANN example that's built a whole structure around bringing in its notion of enhanced cooperation. So there's lots of different models in between. And so to sort of say we have to go back to the beginning and talk about it in a single stakeholder manner just seems disruptive and such. So I really ask that those that are putting together the take into realization, one, looking at it, if they decide to include the subject, is to look at what is being done and how we take that further, how we extend that model that we have enhanced cooperation. It may not be what was in some minds at the beginning, though it was in others, and how do we take it forward? So that's one of the points that I really wanted to make there. The second point I wanted to make is every paper I see about future development, about internet governance, about how to improve things, says capacity building. We need capacity building. I've taken the habit of counting the number of times capacity building is mentioned in any paper. I should put out a graph of it someday, but sometimes 30, 40, 60 times you'll find capacity building being mentioned in a paper. We talk about it all the time. We do the dynamic coalitions, and this will come out when they talk about it, these kinds of policy networks that the MAG does. They are all capacity building. IGF is a major capacity building engine. Part of it, it's not a specific mention, but in the fora notion is the whole notion of capacity building. The problem is nobody runs it. And so if we're going to get serious about it, and I know a lot of people have made this comment, but if we're going to do something serious about capacity building, because it is necessary in every field, in every one of the topics, then we really have to get serious. We have to organize it. We have to coordinate it. We have to put the money into it to make sure it's done. I do coordination of dynamic coalition on schools, and that's already a lot of work for, a little bit of funding. But there are so many things that need to be funded. So that was one I just really wanted to put a stake into and say, you got to be serious about it. We can't just say we need it. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I know this seems incredibly practical, is greater use of hybrid in all of our meetings, in all of our technologies. When people travel someplace, make sure that you include those who can't travel. We keep saying we want greater outreach. We work hard to get greater outreach. We want more people, we want to close the gaps. And certainly we have to close the gaps. But once we close the gap on a population, we have to make sure that they can be included, that they don't need to fly somewhere to be included. And so we really have to put more of a focus. And I would like to see the element paper actually bring out something so practical as how do we reach all the people we are trying to do outreach to? We want to give them the right to participate online in their own governance, in the governance, whether it's internet or any of the the emerging technologies, which also should be multi-stakeholder. So that the final thing I did in the paper, and I used up a little bit of my space, is a lot of us have said Sao Paulo guidelines. We need to do that. I don't know how many people that we say it to actually go and read them. And there was one particular section in the Sao Paulo guidelines on exactly how a multilateral organization could include more multi-stakeholder elements. And, this sort of goes back to the first topic I spoke of, enhanced cooperation happens at home. You enhance cooperation, you include, if you're a multilateral, you include the multi-stakeholder participants. If you're a multi-stakeholder, you include the multilateral. Well, this was recommendation given for how a multilateral organization could be more inclusive of other stakeholders so that even they manage to gain the richness while staying in their own silo. And so basically, I took advantage and repeated those remarks. I won't repeat them now. I'm assuming you can all read them, and probably in this group, everybody probably has read them. But in the larger view, hopefully everybody on the sounding board has read them. Hopefully everybody in the leadership. But I really wanted to point out that for those organizations that stay multilateral, and so many of the organizations working on the sustainable development guidelines, et cetera, which we still care about, are multilateral groups. How do they get more inclusive? We've seen a little bit in the ITU. We need to say more. Thanks for giving me a chance to talk.
Thanks so much, Avery. And thanks for highlighting the São Paulo multi-stakeholder guidelines and the intersection as well between both spaces. We're going to move into a more interactive part of the webinar with the Q&A. Just reminding folks that if you want to join any of the 3 other planned webinars we have, feel free to message any of us, Henriette, Amrita, myself, Titi, and Chris, and we will be more than happy to include you guys on the list. Henriette, I'm going to hand the floor to you.
Thanks a lot for that, Bruna, and thanks everyone for your papers and for your presentations. We want to ask you all a kind of one question, which you've all covered partly, but we want you to say more about it. Imagine that the IGF gets this mandate you want for it. What would you like to see the IGF look like? And what would you like to see the IGF having delivered by 2030? So in 5 years' time, what does the IGF look like to you, and what role is it playing? Israel, let's start with you.
Thank you. I think that's a really interesting question because we've been having conversations with different partners and community members. And for instance, we partnered with ICANN to produce this document on the 20 years of results of the IGF, because we see as a positive that the IGF is influencing the impact at the local level. But at the same time, we would like to see some streamlining in the program setting, for instance. We are not yet at the moment of offering concrete language or a specific implementation, but we have discussed some ideas. For instance, in the IEF in Oslo, my colleague Olaf Kolkman shared a preliminary idea where we could have like items related, a section, a portion of the agenda related to internet, the infrastructure of the interconnected networks, and some tracks devoted to digital transformation, because we are actually seeing that different topics are being addressed by the IEF, but probably that distinction could be useful just to explicitly identify the topics that are being addressed by the IEF. But something that it's crucial is, at least from our perspective, from these earlier conversations, is that the IEF should preserve this bottom-up multi-stakeholder approach. Because something that we would like to see is renewing the Internet Governance Forum mandates and then transforming the nature of the forum under a top-down approach, subject to a specific office within the UN, with a top-down decision-making, with a totally transformed multi-stakeholder advisory group, in which effectively we could have a permanent IEF, but without the multi-stakeholder approach that we've seen. So it's like trying to find that balance between just preserving the space of influence to drive change at the local level, providing a little bit more of a structure, but without like totally losing the bottom-up collaborative nature of the forum.
Thanks for that, Israel. And my cat has just joined. He wants to see more role for cats in the IGF. And Ellie, let's move on to you while I get rid of this big animal.
Lovely, thanks, Henriette. I've got 4 comments that I'd like to make, but I'll make them in my capacity as Global Partners Digital rather than the GDRC WSIS, because we didn't elaborate a lot on this in our submission. So 4 things. The first is that I think one of the most cherished aspects of the IGF is its connective tissue role and bringing different communities together across geographies, stakeholder constituencies. So to do that, to better fulfill and to continue to fulfill that role, I think we need to be able to ensure that underrepresented groups can be there, can participate fully, are able to participate fully. So for that, I think we need both practical measures, support for travel, for instance. A side note that at GPD, we did the calculations. I think we've supported circa kind of 70 individual civil society trips to be at IGF. So I think continuing to pool those that have resources for groups to get there will be important. And then also ensuring that the IGF's own procedures are open, accessible, inclusive. Host country selection provides for accessible participation. That will be really important. The second thing is to ensure that the IGF can continue to be a space for discussion of the technical elements and technical management of critical internet properties. And this was something that I heard quite a bit from people I spoke to from technical community at this IGF, that they felt that this most recent IGF was one where more technical community were out again in force. And I think ensuring that not sure precisely how you do that, and I'd welcome others' thoughts on this, but ensuring that it retains that technical level of discussion as well. The third is to, again, continue to have and to strengthen its horizon scoping function. I think that's so crucial to the IGF success. And I think actually by having already more underrepresented communities and more technical communities there, you can already fulfill that function to have a more accurate system-wide assessment of the landscape. And then the fourth thing is something that's come up in a few of the submissions to be to have more outcomes focused discussions. This is one I'm a bit tentative about, but I do think that there's a value in having more messages that come out of the IGF that can be embedded in other ongoing processes. And I think the possible role that the IGF could play in GDC and WSIS joint implementation review could be quite critical given the nature of it as a principal multi-stakeholder venue, which brings together a unique set of stakeholders. So 4 things: promoting connective tissue, technical elements, horizon scoping, and possibly more outcomes focused would be my vision. Thanks.
Thanks very much for that, Anne-Lee. I think as we think through what is needed at an operational and institutional capacity level to achieve those, I think that also begins to help us visualize what kind of IGF we need. Craig, what is your view? Especially, in fact, Craig, I want to add something to your question because you emphasized in your paper follow-up and a more sort of deliberate process towards measuring and follow-up. And it might be worth you also reflecting on how you think one could follow up and measure the impact and effectiveness of this future IGF that we want.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to start with, I agree with a lot of what's just been said. I think first and foremost, preserving the bottom-up multi-stakeholder entire nature of the IGF is important. I think if we are looking down the line, looking at extended mandates or permanency in an ideal world, I think one of the big questions that comes with this is where it fits within the UN system and sort of the funding. So the elephant's in the room, so to speak, when it comes to the IGF. Now, we're really keen to see that it increases both funding and its sort of cemented position in the UN system. We think there's a big role for private sector to hopefully play in securing the future of the IGF, and they'll come on to why that'll be important, why that might be sort of looked upon fondly when we come on to what it can achieve just in a moment. We are quite interested by the EU proposal for reintroducing the director level position. I think that sort of sat above the IGF within the UN system once upon a time. Again, that will just help give it some give it its place in the system more broadly. We're not fully convinced by a rebrand of the IGF. I know that's been something that's been talked about quite broadly. We think that, well, for start, digital governance is something that's so broad, undefined. We can risk losing a lot of the focus that the IGF has, and just end up getting into something that could be quite duplicative of other sort of broader digital and tech forums that are in the world. We'd like to see, as a result of all of that, strong. I think Ellie's touched on it, but we do see a role for the IGF to have some stronger outcomes. Now, that's not necessarily in getting towards, making recommendations or policy approaches or things like that. But the IGF is really well placed to discuss new ideas and challenges. We already do that anyway, but actually test bedding some of the new ideas that are coming to the fore at the moment. Using it, we've got esteemed colleagues from across the entire spectrum, and if you look back at what IGF has done in the past, it's the work that it helped to achieve in the IANA transition, increasing IXPs in Africa and things like that. These are it's definitely stepped into these big challenges in the past and helped to find the ideas to take that forward. And hopefully, once we get into that, we're looking ahead to 2030. If we are in that sort of space, then I'd like to say we'd have more senior delegations there. You know, it was really great in Norway to see so many ministers on the ground. I think certainly some of the most I've seen, some of my colleagues have seen in recent times. Hopefully that's a trajectory we continue going along. And then, as I say, you know, a private sector investment is really quite crucial. If we've got the senior leadership there, if we are actually coming up with outcomes, and it's something that's going to be a little bit more investable in the future. In terms of measuring and monitoring, well, I think that sort of ties in sort of quite well in how, you know, all of that together. I don't exactly have an answer specifically how. However, a lot of the information that we have in the benefits and the impacts that the IGF has had to date actually come from a paper that was written just outside of Oxford University in Oxford in the UK. Which really looked at what the IGF has done over the past 20 years. And I think some kind of reporting like that could really be quite crucial. And I think tying that in again with the regional and local IGFs is also what's most important, because a lot of these ideas really stem from local communities, local community challenges and opportunities, and they filter up through the system. And there's no real way of capturing that. And I think we really need to do a better job. As I think WSIS is a really good opportunity to have some form of recognition, more recognition of these smaller groupings of the IGF, and really start to sort of gather the information and record a lot of the conversations that are happening, because a lot of the solutions are being discussed already, and a lot of them are already there. And I think, yeah, there's a way in which we can capture them better is something that I think something we need to get to if we're looking in the years ahead.
Thanks for that, Craig. Avery, let's go with you, and I'm glad to see the hands are coming up. So please do start raising your hands or putting your questions in the chat. Avery, you worked in the Secretariat, so you have an insider view as well.
Yes, I had the fortune to work in the Secretariat and in some bit of ancient history to have actually been on the MEG. So yeah, now I just sort of sit and watch. And one of the things that's funny, I find myself in disagreement with a lot of people, is I would like to see the IGF become less top down. A lot of people speak of it how bottom up it is. It is still a UN controlled thing. I have an argument by what the word initiate means. I would really like to see more multi-stakeholder, not only in designing the program, but in actually directing the whole operation of it with less of a command position for the UN. And but also this just brings me to my second one, is understanding what we mean when we use terms like bottom up and top down, what we mean by multi-stakeholder. A lot of us, you know, for example, in this case, people see the IGF as bottom up. I see it as top down. Okay, so what do we mean by our differences? How do we actually bring those conversations together? Likewise with multi-stakeholder. A lot of people say, we're multi-stakeholder. Someone else will shout, no, you're not. Because there isn't just one model of multi-stakeholder operations. There are many. Every group of, especially bottom up, but even top down, comes up with its own version of how it's going to do it. This is a good thing. So I'd like to see the IGF spending less time defending a multi-stakeholder model, defending its multi-stake, but actually opening up discussion about what we mean. How does it spread? How do we bring multi-stakeholder model? Sao Paulo guidelines start with that. But how do we bring that more and more into the work that's being done? How do the different models work? And basically taking it down a level and sort of saying, there are many ways of doing it. What are they? Which ones are you able to pick up? Which ones aren't? I would like to see more of a natural introduction of all the new fields, the new issues, the emergent, you know, quantums and AIs and such, and sort of as they're coming in, as they're mentioned, look at them from a multi-stakeholder perspective. Don't ask the question, should multi-stakeholder governance be here or not? Assume that for every emergent issue, there is a multi-stakeholder model that can be used. The stakeholders may be different in each of these. How do we incorporate that? How do we do that? So that, and then finally, more outcomes that can be used in schools and elsewhere to do capacity building. So the IGF has to be the one that is feeding in many ways the whole capacity building for others. Here's how you approach new issues. Here's how you make the multi-stakeholder. Here's how you take it further. That's what I would like to see it doing. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Avery. And I mean, my only reflection on that is that, I mean, it's good to get different views, but I just know from experience we should never underestimate the operational and human resource capacity that is needed to be inclusive and to execute processes that are bottom up. You know, I think bottom up is not just volunteerism. It does need resources. But now I'm opening the floor to all of you. And please keep in mind that the purpose of this is not to just have another debate. We want you to reflect on the papers that have been presented and the ideas and proposals that have been shared. You'll all have a time or the opportunity, I hope, to share your own proposals. But today we really would like you to engage the presentations. So Juan, you've had your hand up. You are welcome to share your questions and comments. Everyone, please remember to introduce yourself. We have quite a few newcomers today. So even if you are old-timers like myself and Juan, please do introduce yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now? Because I have a new microphone here.
We hear you very well.
Okay, my name is Juan Fernandez. I'm from the Cuban Ministry of Communications. As Andrea just said, I'm an old-timer. I've been in WSIS, WIGIG, IGF, all the time. Okay, first of all, I want to congratulate Bruna, Henriette, TT, and Chris for this good, excellent idea to get to these documents directly from the source. I think it's very everybody can learn from this. So I'm not going to take time. I'm only going to make a brief comment about the documents, and especially about something that I find missing in them. Of course, the main focus of this document is the process of WSIS, the creation of the document, and also the discussion and follow-up on GDC. But some of them mention some substantive issues, especially the one in ISOC that mentioned the attributes of internet. And I'm very surprised that the economic aspect of the internet has not been mentioned. You know that this is a topic that has been around for many years. And even some people say that internet has a national tendency towards monopolies. And there's the issue of taxation, and this relates with the paradox that the IGF has been said that there's no funding, but on the other hand, vast fortunes are being created out of the internet itself and of the users. So I think that the issue of economics, whenever we are thinking on the future of the internet, is something that have to be included. Of course, there will be different views, different ways to approach to that, but also I want to remind that the economic sustainability is one of the 3 pillars of sustainable development. And as a matter of fact, the other 2, that is the environmental sustainability, also needs to be addressed, because as you know, with the artificial intelligence and the huge need of electricity and water, that's creating some impact in the environmental part, and also the social impacts. That is the 3rd pillar of sustainable development. There's a big discussions about the cultural aspects of the internet, how is that affecting cultural. There's been a nice debate in the chat, not in the chat, in the mailing list about indigenous people, how to keep the culture of indigenous people. So I think that we have to have a very balanced approach towards the internet, focus in the concept of sustainable development that has the 3 pillars: the economic stability, that have the social stability to be there, and also the sustainability in environmental area. So that's all, Bruna. Thank you, Henriette. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for that, Juan. I don't see any other hands yet, so I want to ask a follow-up question. The UK paper really emphasized environmental impact. I think what one reflection I had when I read the papers and is particularly if I compared the UK paper and the ISOC paper, Israel, your paper has these very inspiring attributes of the internet. But as I read them, I felt, I questioned, how would one reconcile those? How would you actually, for example, if you take something like environmental impact, how do you reconcile open innovation, for example, with protecting against environmental harms? So maybe if you could share, starting with you, Craig, because you really, the UK did emphasize this, what you would like to see emerge from the WSIS outcome document, but also the role of the IGF in addressing this challenge of the environmental impacts of increasing digitalization. And Israel, maybe a reflection from you as well on whether that came up and what you see as some of the challenges. It was interesting to see that in Ellie's paper, they did talk about platform accountability, for example, which might be part of that, although it was linked to AI. But yes, how do you see us dealing with this challenge of environmental impact, particularly if we also want to maintain, a multi-stakeholder approach to addressing these challenges?
Thank you. Yes, it's a good question. It's a very good question. I think in terms of what we're looking for in the WSIS outcome document, we have a very short time to be able to negotiate this. Essentially, what we're looking for it to do is to recognise the challenges that we all face. And I think making sure that everyone around that table is all in agreement about the particular challenges and what the opportunities are. Now, we're not going to have time to come up with what those solutions will be. But as I say, and I'm glad you mentioned the IGF, Henriette, but I think identifying these challenges and the opportunities and the will to remedy them, to mediate them, is something then that can be mandated towards the likes of an improved and strengthened IGF going forwards. As I mentioned just in the previous question, I do see the IGF, the UK sees the IGF as a place for discussing these sort of challenges and ideas, coming up with sort of test bedding solutions, coming up with community solutions. More importantly as well, we should recognize that there's no one size fits all approach to all of this. Everything in different communities, different environments, the questions will be slightly different and the answers will be different as well. But I think really using the IGF, using its local regionalized channels as well to help come up with those localized specific outcomes and solutions, I think is what's really important. I think that's where the IGF can continue to have a really strong role going forwards in doing that. But again, it all starts with those, making sure that we're all on the same page come December on what those challenges are and that we all agree to the opportunities that can be had.
And
thanks for that, Craig. And I think that really emphasizes the role of the IGF as a kind of hub for innovation in policy and regulation. Israel, do you want to respond? And Ellie, you just jump in as well if you want to respond to this.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a pertinent part of the conversation because in our paper, we are focusing on the vision that we have that the internet is for everyone and starting from the connectivity aspect, because still there's 1/3 of the global population that has not access to the internet, and then they are missing the opportunities on digital services, social and economic opportunities for the internet. How to reconcile that with environmental aspects or some other considerations? That's why we are like intertwined the critical characteristics of the internet with the attributes for multi-stakeholder governance, because we believe that diversity, that broad range of perspectives from different stakeholders with different expertise is the needed environment to create solutions that can strike a balance between the different tensions that may be created or the challenges in achieving specific solutions. So that's why we are also trying to focus or to frame the WSIS+20 review in the context of this two groups of characteristics, attributes to be preserved, so that people can exercise the ability to create, to connect, to benefit, to be safe, to be secure. So from our perspective, it's a matter of keeping in consideration that the WSIS+20 review, the outcome document is going to contain some high-level language that is going to allow the community to work on specific tactics, but to serve a bigger set of benefits, a bigger vision, where all people have the ability to connect, communicate, innovate, share, choose, be safe, trust on the internet. So it's something that we don't believe is going to be solved in the review per se, but the conditions to keep working as a multi-stakeholder community should be there as a result of the +20 review.
Thanks for that, Israel. Ellie, do you have anything to add? And just Juan reminded me that I should ask you all to comment on his points about the economic aspects not being covered well enough. And please, everyone else, I see amazing comments in the chat, but please raise your hand so we can hear you speak. We have just under half an hour left. Ellie.
Thank you. Yeah, I can react to Juan's comment then, which I really appreciate. There is some discussion in our paper. I agree that it is perhaps a bit limited and something that we can look to develop going forward. But we do refer to the potential of internet and digital technologies to advance sustainable development in its 3 dimensions. And then I think that we've turned to international human rights law, specifically the UN Guiding Principles on Business and human rights due diligence and impact assessment as practical tools that can help to operationalize business responsibilities to address and mitigate negative human rights impacts. But there is also some more detailed discussion about platform accountability and the need to curb data extraction and data exploitative methods and models. But I would say that I do think some of the coalition partners have developed and elaborated on this more in their submissions in a really positive way. I think our paper is quite reactive to what is in the draft and thus perhaps maybe misses some of those elements that may not be so well captured. But I really appreciate the comment, so I thank Juan for making it.
And thanks for that. And Bruna, just jump in if you have more questions. I just want to ask Craig and Avery, Isra, do you have anything to add on the economic aspect? Juan's questions.
I'd have to jump in quickly from my side. I think this is. I think the reason maybe why it's not really there is because I don't know if we've got a holistic, full piece of work that, just to my knowledge, that sets all that out. I do wonder whether the approach we're taking in WSIS, sort of strengthen the WSIS architecture, strengthen UNGIS, strengthen that interagency coordination, is something that can help alleviate that. Now, I'm sure there's loads of work out there that various UN agencies have done, from UNDP to UNESCO, etc., who have done a lot of work, maybe in their own sort of within their own remits to sort of, but I don't think we've got a consolidated maybe UN piece of work, and maybe without that, it's sort of we can't look at it maybe in the way that we maybe should be, as Juan's suggesting. So I think maybe something we should be looking at through this WSIS review is actually how we can better join up those UN agencies, better sort of deliver that, the impact assessments, the economic impact, the economic assessments that we're talking about, and then when we have that holistic picture, that's actually something we can pick up and run with between now and whenever the next review might be. But I sort of think, in this particular review, just to my knowledge, unless anyone knows differently, I don't think we have that fully holistic view across the system.
Thanks for that, Craig. I see Ana Neves is still with us, and I know she needs to go. Ana, before you go, are you able to just elaborate a bit on your comment about the review of the IGF?
Yes, I'm still here and about to leave, but happy to deliver something concerning my my short comments. So one of the comments is about so until the end of the negotiations, until December, it will not be possible to have renew IGF, and I also think that the WSIS forum is connected to this to the future of the IGF. So we are always asking for not duplicate the work. So and I have the feeling that if we are not going to solve this overlapping between the WSIS forum and IGF, so we'll continue not to be very efficient. So, but I think that it takes time. And so 2026 should be the year where we should have, we should have a year to think about improvements and not the renewal, but not the renewal, no, not at all. But it's about improvements and to make IGF more effective and more important for all stakeholders, including governments. And at the same time, I think that CSTD should also be there should be also the target to improve CSTD and to better address the tasks that CSTD has and how it could be improved as well. So all in all, it's my point is to have 2026 as a year to deliver important components, ideas to really improve IGF. And of course, I'm always asking for an improvement to the IGF as well, because I think that CSTD as an intergovernmental body could benefit a lot from multi-stakeholder in it as well. So it's not to end the discussions by December, because I think it's not possible. We don't have the time, but to get a mandate from the final negotiations to continue 2026 as a year to improve what will be the outcome of WSIS+20. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna, and that's a very important comment. And I would just add to that from my own perspective, to make or to clearly assign accountability for monitoring implementation of that process, because we do have a history in the IGF of proposals for improvement. For example, the expert group meeting that met in 2022, but it's not always clear where the accountability for implementing those lie. And also resources are constraints. Israel, let's hear from you. I think you still want to respond to Juan, but anything else you want to say? And then after that, there was a comment in the chat from the Dynamic Teen Coalition saying that they find the IGF not inclusive. So it might be useful if you can respond or elaborate on that comment, but try and link it to some of the suggestions that we've had from the speakers. So first to Isra and then to the Dynamic Teen Coalition.
Thank you. Yeah, now responding to Juan's comments, we believe that it's a really important aspect. And the thing is that, for instance, our non-paper is focusing like on this forward-looking vision where the WSIS+20 review is one milestone, an important one, of a bigger conversation, because the work is not going to end with the WSIS+20 review, but we are referencing to the importance of people having access to the digital services, social and economic opportunities that the internet creates. Then, in our response to the elements paper, for instance, we stated clearly that we were concerned about the lack of references to sustainable development. And that's why one of our priorities for the +20 review is that the outcomes of the WSIS+20 review would contribute to the sustainable development goals, which includes the economic aspect. So I think that we are going to see more explicit mentions to that dimension in successive phases of this process. For instance, once the zero draft is released, probably we are going to have a specific language to that respect. But yeah, we are seeing that like in different layers. And also, just quickly to react to Anna's ideas, just thinking about also to your questions, Henriette, about what the future IGF would look like. Probably not only in 2026, but having like a permanent feedback mechanism within the IEF where the committee could keep improving the forum in successive years, not only like every 5 or 10 years, like learning constantly from every iteration. Just food for that. This is something just personal, just to entertain the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that, Ezra. Stacey, are you still around and willing to say a little bit more about the Dynamic Teen Coalition's experience?
I'm happy to briefly, but I do believe this should be taken somewhere else, as it already has been. Can you hear me okay? Just checking.
We can.
Am I clear?
We can hear you. Yes.
Cool, thank you. I wasn't planning to speak, so I'm not on my normal headset. Briefly, the Dynamic Teen Coalition came into existence over the course of about 3 years. We have solved the so-called UN's youth problem by creating a fully inclusive, lifelong multi-stakeholder model that many of you have seen by now. We have also experienced and have heaps of evidence, not intended to be collected, but by just existing, of repeated demeaning language, censorship, abuse, apparent conspiracies to keep us from participating and being involved, which have gotten better in some cases, but not all. And while we have repeatedly tolerated that misunderstanding and tried to find multiple ways to bridge it, at this point, the IGF does not support teens who are currently being banned in multiple countries. As we know, as we've been reporting since last October, and we have a database on it that we've been running that nobody else seems to have compiled to the extent that we have. And we're also trying to get our lifelong inclusive multi-stakeholder model accepted so that teens actually have a seat at the table that they're currently being pushed off of. Now, I don't want to get into personal details, but if I continue to talk about this here, we'll get derailed from what matters, which is we believe in multi-stakeholderism. I have made videos about it. We have absolutely no doubt we belong there, we being teens, and I'm putting myself there just as a co-chair. I'm obviously not a teen. However, until there's a model that accounts for everybody, and someone fabulous like Jutta perhaps looking at children 12 and under, then this is not a multi-stakeholder model, because we have been punished for attempting, after negotiating directly with multiple people to have access for our teens through 2024 and 2025, successfully pen holding. We are not being treated with respect. And it has to stop if you want our support for the IGF, because the ITU is treating us like gold. They're helping us. They care about us. So that's my comment. I want to see a fully accountable model so that teens don't have to beg and act lesser than to be heard. And I'm sorry to take this on this far, but this has to be dealt with. It's becoming so problematic that we're involving more and more UN agencies in the discussion. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that person. But we can't be abused any longer, okay? Thank you.
Thanks for that, Stacey, and you're right. This is not the exactly the forum for this, but at the same time, it's good to hear this because it illustrates the complexity of what it means to be inclusive. Please, if you want to share some of your links or your URLs in the chat for those of you that don't know much about the DTC, please do. But I'm going to hand over to Bruna, and Bruna, you have Judith in the queue, and you'll hear more from me at the end.
Awesome. Thanks, Henriette. Judith, I'm gonna go straight to you. You have the floor.
Hi, thanks so much. And I didn't realize that you were opening it up to others who are not on the agenda. But I also wanted to be, I presented as, not as myself, but as the co-coordinator for the Dynamic Coalition on Accessibility and Disability. And we presented at the consultations our contribution to the Elements paper of how we think that accessibility needs to take more of a front and center role. Looking at the Elements paper has been focusing, is putting accessibility on the sidelines instead of being an active partner in it. And there's a lot of the other questions in there, which I mostly posed, but what we were discussing is that we had, after 20 years of IGF discussions, and every session, yes, having 1 or 2 sessions for persons with disability, few people with disability actually come to the IGF, and even fewer, few of them participate. And the question is, how, like Alvy was saying, how are we building the capacities in the right manner? Is there something else we can do? What do we need to change this? And mostly, how do we change the mindsets, not just of the people coming to the IGF, but also the organizer of the event, and increasing the awareness of everyone involved in creating and producing the knowledge is a way to make everything more accessible. So our question is, for the people who produce these, is whether the knowledge can be accessible to people with disabilities or not. And we notice also that we've been working exclusively with the IGF, and we've seen a lot of improvements at the IGF, but we haven't been working with the WSIS+20 group, and we had heard reports of how that group was very inaccessible for persons with disabilities. And they were treated as second-class citizens. So the question is, when we separate those two, we've seen great strides in the IGF, but in other groups there is not. And we also want to look at funding and developing accessible training people. There's always been talk about putting, just like other groups have wanted a separate section for women and gender, or indigenous people, maybe a separate group on marginalized groups, but separate is not what we want, because we want to be integrated into the actual whole package. So we don't want to be thought of as separate. We want to be part of the fabric of the IGF. So I can find a link what Judith put in, what they put in, and so, but we've been sort of working with the groups, and in providing this awareness training and funding people with disabilities to actually come to the IGF to experience it, and working to try to raise awareness. But it's always an uphill battle because other groups are not necessarily aware. You work with the secretariat, but then there's so many other groups that aren't accessible. But it's not that they're not wanting to be accessible. It's oftentimes they're not aware of how they could be made accessible, or what what publications they're doing that make it not accessible. So that was my brief comment, but thanks so much.
Thanks, Judith. Before I go into the final wrap-up notes, I was just going to ask whether any of the presenters would like to comment on the accessibility points. I know Ari mentioned a little bit about people joining those events remotely, Ali also had a point about further inclusion of different stakeholder groups and so on. But just wondering, Craig, Israel, Ali, and Ari, if you would have anything to add on the accessibility points as well.
Just very quickly from UK perspective, obviously, I completely, agree that this is something that needs to be prioritised. I think, what was discussed by some of the other panelists, where they touched on bits, inclusivity is pretty crucial. The UK is, we've got more detail on what we do mention accessibility in other bits of our position paper. We also mentioned multilingualism and other sort of bits of cultural diversity. But I think the point that Judith you made there is really quite important. Actually, was yes, there are measures, i.e., virtual sort of ability to join some of the sessions and things like that, or the big meetings. But again, it's that actually integration point that is really crucial. And yes, I think you're absolutely right that we have not bridged that. It shouldn't be that some people with disabilities can only participate remotely. I think there needs to be more that we can do. To ensure that we cross that. I don't have an answer, unfortunately, to that, but I think making it a priority, something that discussing it openly, and making sure that in all the work that we do, accessibility, no matter what that looks like, whatever form it takes, accessibility is front and foremost.
Thanks, Craig. Isa?
Yeah, thank you. And I think that and thank you, Judith, for sharing your statement. We see that as a cross-cutting topic, for instance, for the core abilities that the internet must offer, for the priorities for the review. And something that I was thinking while listening to Judith is that it's going to be super important for at least for us, and I think it should be also important for other organizations and people to distinguish between some language that we will need to ask for in the high-level outcome document. This high-level language highlighting accessibility, highlighting these important cross-cutting topics, without forgetting that there are some tactics attached to that high-level language that we as community we need to work in the after years and months after the +20 review, just on how to implement that high-level language and to keep ourselves accountable, all the community, to make those promises a reality and to keep us in check that we are progressing in the right direction year after year. So I think that it's going to be important to differentiate these two between the tactics and the high-level language, and just to keep them all really tightened to keep progressing towards the future that we want to see.
Thanks, Isa. Avri, I also see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I agree. Judith at one point said it involves capacity building. I think in a large sense it does. I think perhaps I'm taking too positive a view on the nature of the problem, but I think most people don't even understand that they're being biased or discriminating. They think they're being practical. They think they're being normal. They don't understand. And in that, you have a capacity building. You really do have to educate people on the various issues where they are not being inclusive and why they're not being inclusive, and make them understand that. There's a second part to it, though, that I think is much harder. And this one also goes to the only answer I had for one about, gee, why is there such greed in the economy that, platforms are taking over everything? And on a lot of these, until we intentionally change our nature and learn how to sort of educate human nature to not want to be that way, it won't change. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Avri, and thanks to all of the speakers. Ali, do you want to add anything, or should we move to final remarks?
Or we can wrap them together, whichever you prefer.
Thanks so much. I think just on the benefit of time, thanks a lot for everyone that joined today and all of our speakers. We've heard many things, from inclusion of individuals in the IGF, making the frameworks a bit more open and integrating them into multilateral spaces, and also making sure that some of the values that guide multi-stakeholderism also are able to guide some of the multilateral discussions and negotiations we'll see in the future. We also discussed a lot of like social justice related aspects about this environment, as well as things like taxation, how to strengthen the IGF Secretariat, and all of the things we care so much about. So I would really like to thank everyone that joined. Just flagging that this was the first of 4 webinars. If folks would like to join any of the upcoming webinars, please feel free to flag it to us, and we will be more than happy to showcase you guys on the list. But as of now, I think we can close this off. And Henriette, do you want to add anything to our closing remarks?
Thanks, Bruna. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I do have a question. Just, show of hands. How many people managed to actually read all, and this is not a judgment, managed to read the papers before they joined the session today? Okay, I see quite a lot of hands, but I don't see all hands because I think it's hard for us to do that. But just to say, we are urging you to try and read the papers. We are very good in this IGF community to have general discussions, and I think it's one of our strengths. What we're trying to do with this webinar is to discuss those specific inputs that people have taken the time to put in writing. So obviously, you don't have to read the papers. Everyone is welcome, but we do urge people to read the papers and try and come with questions. So thanks again to everyone who participated, presented, and to the working group strategy and the MAG for making this possible.
Yes, thanks everyone. And just on the next webinar, we're just clearing up on what's going to be the exact timing for that, because we have some speakers from the APAC region. So we want to be more cognizant of the time, the regions and the time difference and so on. But as soon as we finalize the details, we'll be sharing it on the working group strategy list and other lists as well. So thanks a lot for joining, and see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruna. Thank you.
Bye.
That's great. Great meeting.
Bye. Bye, everyone. See you. Thank you so much.
Bye.